When I used to live in my hometown, sometime in 2018, it was around fall, and this was one of the times when I was taking my dog for a walk in the woods. There was a woods path that had a bunch of trails and stuff, so I took my dog there, and sometimes I would walk there with some friends and maybe my brother every once in a while. The forest that was not far from where I used to live was a pretty nice area as it I knew the trails from some of them and I know where which trails lead to which places and etc. It wasn't that bad as long as you lived the area where you knew and as long as you know what's coming up, you're bound to find out more about it. Now, to make this very clear, I was walking my dog one day through the forest path as it was September and the leaves have started to change color as fall was fast approaching, although it was still summer. Now, as I was walking with my dog, I ended up looking to see that there was someone or something in the ground. Now, however, whatever this person was didn't really notice me, and I just stared at it, thinking it might have been maybe a teenager. I tried to ignore it and continue on, but no matter how hard I tried, I looked over there a few minutes later, and the person, whoever it was, took off running into the woods. I tried to catch him, but he was too fast and he disappeared, and I had no idea why he disappeared like that, but he disappeared. I went over to see what he dropped, and I found out it was a container or something. I opened up, and I was very surprised. In there, in that little container, was a smell of rotting flesh, which I nearly gagged. I ended up reporting this into the authorities and explained to them and the police of what this man looked like. They searched the forest area the rest of the day, but they couldn't find the person, and they had no idea on who it was that dropped it. I have a feeling that it might have been somebody trying to maybe think of luring people into a trap or something. But with that said, I had never encountered that man again. Sometime in 2012, I was about maybe 14, and this was when I was just starting freshman year in high school. This story honestly bring me chills every time I think of it. Now, this happened to me and my friend, which we'll call Morgan. Morgan and I were pretty good friends as we had a lot of things in common, and she was a really good friend of mine. We happened to be really close friends, and even though she was a little older than me, she was still a very sweet and nice girl you could ever meet. However, one day we were doing this gym class where our gym teacher would take us into the forest. He's done this every day since I started high school, but it was a nice place, so we had a good forest behind the school and we had lots of places, so we were very surprised as to we would came across one. Now, the forest we have at the back of the school had a lot of trails leading to different places, so it was not that common to see, lots of other people walking their dogs, sometimes go dirt biking, and etc. The place looked really neat and really nice, and we've done trails every now and then. But one day while we were at school, we discovered something that we never expected to see, and this is going to be important in the story. Now, Morgan and I were just changing and getting into our gym clothes when we suddenly looked over to see that our teacher had left without us. I didn't know why our teacher left, but maybe he might have thought that we were still changing and probably thought he had everybody. It did happen at least a few times here and there to other people, but when that happens, we usually stay in the school until then. But Morgan and I decided we would go try to find our class, so we went inside the forest. As we went inside the forest, we ended up walking on a trail that we never thought our class went on, but we never saw it before, so we continued going down that route. As we were walking in the forest, we ended up seeing something. Morgan ended up seeing something in the distance. She got my attention, and I looked over and I asked her what it was, and she said, "There's a cabin not far from where we are standing." I looked over to see that there was a cabin, and I had never seen it before, but of course it did have some vines growing on certain parts of it, and there was some mold on the cabin, and it looked slightly rotted in some places of the woods. So we walked over to the cabin, and when we looked over, we couldn't see anybody who owned the cabin, and we thought that somebody might be owned it, but we couldn't find it, and we were getting really concerned. I didn't even really know about it, so of course we could really see that someone or something was in the woods, or at least someone was in there at one point. Morgan and I decided to check out the place, so we walked inside the cabin, and of course we pushed the door open. Luckily it wasn't locked. It was a pretty interesting place. I've never seen it before, and it looked really old. It looked like it'd been built around 50 or so years ago. It looked really abandoned, but we ended up looking more into it, and we ended up exploring the area. Now, as we were exploring, I looked over to see that there was something that I have no idea what it was. But of course, we were continuing to go on more and more into the cabin. We looked around, and of course, we ended up looking around to see if anyone was in there, but there wasn't. There was some beer butt cans, litter, and there was even graffiti around. So we had no surprise that other teenagers had been there before us. And as of this, we were pretty surprised as to why it was there. To be safe, we ended up looking over, but we couldn't find it, and we ended up realizing that somebody might have been there already before us, as I felt the urge that someone was watching us. I couldn't really point out what it was, or who it was for that matter, but it looked something really unsettling. Now, to be completely honest, I thought maybe it might have been my imagination, but I was wrong later on in the story. Now, we decided to continue on more in the forest, but we couldn't find anybody, and we called out if anyone was there, but of course, with that being said, I couldn't see anyone, and we ended up going downstairs, and we headed back outside, and as we were heading back outside, we were heading over towards whatever it was, but I saw a figure standing about a couple feet away. I honestly don't know if that was a man or a woman, but it looked really unsettling. So I called out, "Hey, you need help?" I called. But whoever it was turned it towards me, and it was a woman. She had a long hair, and her long hair was basically laid down to her shoulders, and she looked very unsettling. I did not know what this woman was doing, so I had bad vibes that someone or something might be around. So I try not to think about it too much and try to go back the way we came. But as Morgan and I were gonna try to get back in, the woman started stepping closer to us. Of course, she was a couple feet away from us, but she started walking towards the cabin, and we realized that this might have been her cabin all along. So we slowly got out and ended up telling her and reassured her that we weren't going to hurt her, but she had to explain what was going on. With that said, this woman let out a scream, and she started to chase after me and Morgan. We ran out of there as fast as we could, but unfortunately, we didn't even see anybody anymore, as we turned around after we got far away from the cabin, but we couldn't find the woman who chased me and my friend. But as of this, we never went back into that woods with that trail again, and of course we never told anybody about this, as we were afraid that we were going to get into major trouble. But thank God, we never saw that woman again in the woods, and as of this, we never even wondered if the woman was still there. This was honestly the most scariest encounter I've ever had. So, this happened about maybe a few years ago when I was on a field trip with my class. We went to this one place that I remembered. It was called a Tiffin Center or something like that, where there was a lot of great places like some hiking trails and etc. and the preserves of wildlife and etc. We really liked that area, so we went there for a field trip one year. Now, I was in a group with a few of my friends named Darren, Ren, Jacob, Gub, and even Macy. We were all in a group together, and we were just doing our, usual thing what the teacher says is to look around, don't even bother for straying off the path, behave yourself, stay in a group, and etc. So we went inside the trail and we were exploring the area. As we were walking in the woods, Jacob said that there was an old school bus in there, and he pointed in the distance that in the trees there was an old school bus rusting and rotting in the woods. I had no idea how the school bus got there, and Darren said we should check it out. So we strayed off the path, and luckily no one saw us, and we went inside the woods more and more. Of course, it was around almost winter time, and it was November, so snow was about to appear any second at that time. When we got up to the school bus, we ended up seeing that the doors were open, and luckily we walked inside. There was some mold and even moss around the area, and we honestly didn't expect to see more of this. But we went into the bus and expected to see somebody there, but there was nobody there, and that was honestly unnerving. I ended up looking to see that there was something in the boxes that was not far, and of course Darren and Jacob noticed it too and asked what was in the box. So I walked over to what seemed to be the box, and when I opened the box, I honestly felt my heart skip a beat. Inside that box, there were a bunch of weapons. There were some guns that were illegal to own in any country, and I didn't even expect it to see it. But there were posters of children have gone missing, and I honestly felt sick. We decided that we should report this to the police, and we were honestly sickened by it. Darren, obviously, along with me and Jacob and Macy, we ended up exiting out of the bus, and we ran as fast as we could. And as we ran, we stopped at the front of the house, or at least the Tiffin Center conversation building, and we told them exactly what we saw. They called the police, and they ended up searching the bus, but the box containing the evidence was not there. They still took our statement, and they still said that if they ever see that box again, that we need to report it to the authorities. But since then, I had no idea who owned those weapons, and who took them, or who owned them for that matter. But I never saw this happen again, and I still wonder, what was this person doing with all these weapons? This was honestly something that I never expected to see, but it was definitely something that made me unsettled for a very long time. Okay, so this kind of happened to me along with my family as we were going camping one day. Well, this didn't really happen to my family per se, but it happened to me when I was about maybe 17 years old, and I was camping one day with a group camp. Now, we were going on a camping trip for a few days, and there was this little big Girl Scout house that the Girl Scouts used to stay over. Some people were sleeping in the tent, while some were sleeping in the inside of the bunk beds. I liked sleeping in the bunk beds as it was pretty neat and you didn't have to worry about the bugs or anything like that. But one day something really caught my eye that I didn't really expect. We were all sleeping in tents one year, so I didn't really care for that much, because I really liked sleeping on the inside. But after this experience, I never really went camping very much. Now, to be completely honest and cut to the chase, I was basically in the tent with my friend Mackenzie. We were about to fall asleep in the tent, and I fell asleep without any problems, but it wasn't until a few hours later I woke up what seemed to be maybe 2 or something in the morning, and I heard what seemed to be someone walking not far from the campsite. I thought it might have been one of the counselors, so I got up to see if they were there, but when I got there, I couldn't see anybody. But due to it being so dark, I grabbed my flashlight and pointed at whoever it was. I didn't even move, thinking whatever it was would have hear me. So I walked on the path. I was very quiet as to not wake up the other campers or disturb whoever it was. As I was walking, I ended up looking over to see that there was someone or something walking in the trees. At first, I thought it might have been a bear or maybe some other wildlife I've wandering around in the woods, but I didn't really know as I couldn't really see due to it being dark. I ended up hearing it walking far away, so I followed it, and as I was walking, I was careful though not to wake up anybody. I ended up looking around and calling out, "Is anyone there?" I did it as loud as I could, but not to wake up the other campers. And then I looked, and I could see that from the glow of the moon, standing in the tree line, I looked to be a very tall man, although I didn't know if it was a bear or maybe someone very tall. But from the glow of the moon, I would have mistaken whatever it was to be something else. That big black figure was definitely the size of a gorilla-sized creature, and it ran off into the woods, making a really unsettling roar. I nearly cringed to the bone. I was feeling very horrified. I ended up going back into my tent, and I stayed there for the remainder of the night. Although I couldn't really get to sleep, as it was really, really scary. I didn't want to wake anybody up and saying I saw that creature, but it shivered me to the bone, and I only remained awake for at least a while. I eventually fell asleep, but I could barely get to sleep that night, as I was thinking whatever this creature was going to come back. It wasn't until the next morning where I went over to the path where I saw that gorilla thing, and I looked to see that there were big footprints around the area. I ended up showing it to one of the camp counselors, and they were surprised as didn't hear anyone awake in the middle of the night, and they don't know anybody with such big feet. I don't even know if that was Bigfoot or maybe somebody pulling a prank, but whatever it was, I never saw it again on that trip, and this honestly made me not want to go camping again.